The day is officially here, Broncos fans. The beginning of the 2025 season begins right now. Training camp is the start of Broncos football in 2025. Welcome into the Broncos Breakdown by Chat Sports. My name is Moose, and on today's episode, we're going to give you the latest from Broncos training camp, day one. You're going to see a lot of this guy right here, our guy Zack Stevens from DNVR, basically kind of signifying that, yep, Broncos football is back. We cannot wait to get everything going. Wednesday and Thursday, you will see the media availability for Broncos training camp, with Friday opening up to the public. Now, on today's episode, only 2 players really did anything, and it wasn't even football related in the sense of getting on the field and practicing. But they did sound off on the 2025 season. They got up to the podium, and they decided that they were going to answer all the questions from the media members about what to expect from the Broncos team heading into the season. Those players being Pat Surtain and, of course, Mike McGlinchey. But we're back. We are so freaking back, guys. Broncos football, we're here. So hit that thumbs up button if you haven't already. Helps out the channel and puts more Broncos content on your YouTube timeline. Let's start with the itty-bitty news that I think kind of was mentioned in passing by Mike Kliss, who said Courtland Sutton did a drive-by kind of news dump to all of the Broncos media members, who basically just kind of said, hey, contract extension talks have been kind of ongoing between me and the Broncos, which is great to hear. And honestly, he's not going to get top 10 money. We know this. He's not a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL. But what you can fully expect is definitely more than $20 million a year. I think that's kind of like the baseline for what Courtland's going to be asking for. He might get slightly more than that, but I don't know that he'll end up getting top 10. Top 20 is a possibility. I think currently he's number 23 or 24 in the NFL. But this is, of course, good news. You want to make sure that your number one wide receiver is compensated fairly, because he and your quarterback, who you're not paying anything to right now, are in unison, finally. And they want to be in unison. So making sure that Courtland Sutton gets compensated fairly before the wide receiver market gets completely reshaped and kind of restructured again is probably at the top of the priority list for the Denver Broncos. Now on to the press conferences. Pat Surtain was the first one to sound off. The captain of this team, the leader of this team. Pat Surtain is the best player on the Broncos. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And here's the good news. He feels great about this team. In fact, all of the comments that he wasn't making about himself being the defensive player of the year were all about how much he expects from this team in 2025, claiming that the amount of expectations that he's looking for is through the roof. Now, just a little bit more about PS2, the player. Do we really need to deep dive into all of his strengths and weaknesses? Because he's got all of the strengths and very little weaknesses. The one thing that I would actually challenge Pat Surtain to do in 2025 is to keep the same intensity that he kept in 2024 after he won Defensive Player of the Year. So clearly, having the lull of coming off of an amazing season, right? You kind of hear this like after a team wins a championship, they kind of go into a slump. That's something that individuals can experience as well. Pat Surtain, I don't think is going to happen to, but that would be the one goal that I have for PS2 is to keep the same intensity that you did last year. Because football-wise, skill-wise, athletically, there's really nothing that he needs to work on in his game. He's the best cornerback in the league, and it ain't close. The only other one you could maybe argue is Derek Stingley, but even he still needs a long way to go. Now, Zack Stevens, who I said you are going to be seeing a lot from, basically kind of summed up all of the thoughts and kind of sentences that Pat Surtain kind of reiterated at his press conference, basically saying that, one, Jahdae Barron has already shown that he's smart, savvy, and up-to-date on things. He's super impressed with the rookie and believes that he can play multiple positions, something that we've talked about on the show at multitude and at length, is Jahdae Barron's versatility. He can play a little bit of the nickel corner. He can play the outside corner. You could even move him back to safety in a pinch if you absolutely needed to. And he also sounded off on Courtland Sutton, basically calling Courtland his brother. That's what he said. Courtland's my brother. And that we haven't even seen the best of Courtland Sutton yet, and that he's ready to perform. One thing I'll say about Courtland Sutton is I've said on this show a couple of times that I believe he's in for the best season of his career, which would also warrant, going back to what we talked earlier about, that contract extension. But let's go back to that impressed with Barron thing for a second, because one of the videos that I put out earlier today was talking about the projected starting lineups from ESPN, who listed Pat Surtain, Jahdae Barron, and Jaquan McMillan as the starters for the Broncos. And they left out Riley Moss. And a lot of Broncos fans were like, well, Riley's the guy. But then a couple other guys were saying, well, no, Jaquan McMillan is the second best corner we have on this team. Either way, the Broncos are in really good hands because you could start Moss, you could start McMillan. You kind of have to start Barron unless something terrible happens during training camp, like an injury or he severely takes that, step back. But I think this is a great problem to have. Don't you? If you're arguing about which of these really talented players needs to be the starter, you're in a great spot. There's a lot of NFL teams that would love to be in the position the Broncos are in. You've got the number one corner in the league in PS2. You could start Jahdae Barron on the outside corner, but I personally believe it's going to go Pat Surtain, Riley Moss, Jahdae Barron as your three starters week one. Jaquan McMillan will obviously come in as a rotational piece at multiple times throughout the game. And you could even see that week 2, 3, and 4, Sean Payton do some experimenting with Jaquan McMillan as a starter if he decides to move Jahdae out to cornerback 2. So let me ask you this. If you had to rank the Broncos cornerback room, scale it 1 to 32, with 32 being the absolute worst in the NFL, and number 1 being like they're all lockdowns, where would you have them? I have to have them top 5. I think you can't go any lower than 7, right? If you've got Pat Surtain in your room, you can't really go much lower than that. But I think the Broncos are in a really great spot creating that second no-fly zone. But either way, let me know in the comment section down below. Then we heard from our guy, Mike McGlinchey, right tackle for the Broncos, who talked about the continuity of the Broncos offensive line, who has gotten heaps of praise going into the 2025 season. In fact, he was sporting this super cool hat, which we're going to show you here in just a second. But let's talk about where the Broncos offensive line kind of stacks up in the NFL. Garrett Bowles, 14th out of 81 out of starting left tackles. Ben Powers right in the middle. Wattenberg, upper echelon. Quinn Miners is not born on February 27th or 77th, but that's supposed to say he's number 2 in the NFL. And he absolutely is. He's either the best or the second best guard in the entirety of the NFL. And then, of course, Mike McGlinchey coming in with that top half as well at 34 out of 81. So I look at this and I say the Broncos brought back every single starter from their offensive line in 2024. So the extra year of all playing together is going to do wonders for this offensive line and for Bo Nix, because he's ultimately the one that this benefits the most. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about what Mike McGlinchey said about other Broncos players here in just a moment. But, my friends, it's leaving. Not this Broncos hat that I've definitely got on right now, which, by the way, super cool. It's out of stock right now on Fanatics. But this is leaving very, very soon. The Broncos draft hat. Now, you might be thinking, why are you promoting the draft? The draft is far over. Well, it's not really the draft hat. It's just the hat that the draft picks wore. So if you want to get your Broncos draft hat, do me a favor, go down to the comments and description of today's video. I've put the link there just for you so that you can snag this, because once it's gone, it is gone. You will not be able to get it anymore. Again, chatsports.com/Denver Draft. You can find this hat before it leaves for good and sport what all of the Broncos 2025 draft picks wore on draft night. So back to Zack Stevens for a second, who said Mike McGlinchey said that he feels like this Broncos team could be a championship-level team. Duh. And they needed to earn that. That is the most important thing. This isn't going to be handed to you because on paper your team looks better than the majority of the other NFL teams. This is going to be a tooth and nail dogfight every single week. Can't take any team for granted. And remember, this is what he kind of sported. This is what he was looking like today. I love his hat. It's that throwback, what's that? The throwback Broncos logo. He's looking lean. He's looking mean. He's looking chiseled. He answered every question flawlessly. They look like it's business as usual. And the word that he used was continuity. Because last year, bringing back all the starters from that offensive line seemed to prove that this Broncos team believes that highly in and of itself to go out and win a Super Bowl. The Broncos offensive line, this depth chart with the current backups that they've got and the starters, they know that if they all stay healthy and they all play together and they execute Sean Payton's game plan, they will not only win a playoff game, but they can make a very serious, deep playoff run. But he didn't just talk about the offensive line. He also talked about some additions the Broncos made in free agency, being his former teammates in San Francisco, Talanoa Hufanga and Dre Greenlaw, who, by the way, look outstanding in their Broncos uniforms, do they not? Now, I kind of want to sum up what Zack Stevens said about what Mike McGlinchey said about these guys. That bottom line right there. They're going to help us tremendously. It was a monster addition. Bingo. Monster addition. Because when healthy, these two, they're Pro Bowl level players. Pro Bowl caliber players. Dre Greenlaw, outstanding. Probably the best number 2 middle linebacker in the entire NFL. The only reason he wasn't a number 1 on San Francisco is because he's playing behind future Hall of Famer Fred Warner. But 2023 and 2022, I just want to draw your attention to that. Look at those numbers. He's a blanket over the middle of the field. Can drop back in coverage. Needs to learn how to find his voice as the Mike linebacker and the leader of this defense. And same with Talanoa Hufanga. A very aggressive, hard-hitting, ball hawk safety. Someone that can play up in the box but also drop back in coverage. And I know I've beat a dead horse, but the only thing that these two need to do is stay healthy. Because when they do that, if they do that, you are a scary, scary tandem. And this is a scary Denver Broncos defense. There's a reason that ESPN listed the Broncos as the 6th best roster in the NFL. The guys ahead of them, the Kansas City Chiefs, the Buffalo Bills, the Philadelphia Eagles, the Detroit Lions, and the Baltimore Ravens. That's it. All of those teams, by the way, can win a Super Bowl in 2025. So why not Denver? That is going to do it for us on today's episode. A reminder to like the video if you haven't, subscribe and join the Broncos Breakdown family, and as always, be cool.